I will put a microphone on now because I forget that, so I'll repeat myself. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. In case of a fire alarm, we're not expecting it, I don't think. Exit the doors, both sides, and make your way to the car park. There's water and toilets outside the door there. Water's outside there. This is a public meeting, and members of the public are welcome to listen to the debate today, but unless registered as a speaker, they are not able to take part and speak. We are live web streamed casting today, so I can please remind members to use their microphones, like I just didn't, and remember to turn off when not speaking. In terms of, I also remind you to make sure the mobiles are either muted or turned off, please. In terms of how items are presented, the order of each application is as follows. The case officer will present their report. The objector will speak. The supporter will speak. The parish council representative will speak. The ward member will speak. And members will be able to question the speakers for clarity. In conclusion of the debate on each application, the member will vote and come to decision. At this stage, I would like to ask the people our officers on the top table to introduce themselves, please. I'm Bernard Taylor, and I'm deputy chair of this, but the chairman, unfortunately, is not well, so he's put me in charge for the AF. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Amelia Bolter, Senior Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to this committee. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Fairbairn. I'm Head of Legal Services and the Council's Monitoring Officer.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Houselander. I'm actually the Head of Development Management for West Devon, but I am standing in for Pat Weimer, who's the Head of DM for South Hams, because he's poorly at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Adrian Noon, Planning Officer, presenting the first application today, and I believe the last one as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now onto the agenda. Oh, sorry.
Just in case you're wondering who I am. My name is Janet Wallace. I'm one of the environmental health officers that works for South Hams, and I'm here for the pet crematorium application.
Thank you very much, and apologies. I wouldn't miss you, whatever. We now move on to the agenda proper, and please, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies from Councillor Bonham, Hodgson, Carson and Long. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I need to get nominations for Vice Chair, and I would like to nominate Chris Oram. So any other nominations, or are we all in favour? All in favour, Chris? Thank you. Chris, you can now leave your seat and come and join me. Right, thank you very much. And welcome on the top, Chris, to lead me on. No, I don't mean that literally. The committee, please, you all read the minutes of the last meeting. Do we all agree that they are correct? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. As far as I can see, there's no urgent business that needs to be, no items of urgent business, so that's good. And there's no reason to divide the agenda. Got that clarified. Members, are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. The list of speakers has been circulated to members, so you've all received the list of speakers. Yes. I'll ask now Mr. Fairbairn to run through the slide, please, on the procedure.
Thank you, Chairman. I've agreed with the Chairman that for the benefit of members of the public, who may not necessarily be so familiar with the planning process, and I notice we have a fair number in the gallery today, that I would explain the basic principles that will guide the decision making of the committee today. The committee's starting point is a statutory requirement to have regard to the policies in the development plan. In this case, the development plan is the joint local plan, and in respect of any particular applications, any made neighbourhood plan. Members are also to have regard to any other material considerations. Material planning considerations are those matters that are concerned with the use and development of land in the public interest, and anything that doesn't serve that purpose is irrelevant, and the committee will not take it into account. The committee's decision will be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations suggest otherwise. And the rationale for this is that the development plan is intended to be a carefully drafted and considered statement of policy, published to inform members of the public of the approach which will be followed when making planning decisions, unless there's a good reason to depart from it. So the committee will consider whether the proposed development complies with the development plan as a whole. The joint local plan, like every other development plans, contains broad statements of policy, and it's not unusual for different policies to pull in different directions. So a development proposal may be in accordance with development plan policies which seek to protect, say, for example, the open countryside, but may be contrary to policies that encourage development for employment purposes. In such cases, the committee will make a judgment, bearing in mind such factors as the relative importance of the policies and the extent to which the development proposal complies with them or does not. Chairman, that I think is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All understood, team members. Right, I think we move on now with the first application, which is application number 3093, 23 VAR. And the officer, Mr. Noon, will present his case. There are no speakers on this, as the application has previously been spoken on 20th February 25, apart from Mr. Jeff Davis, geotechnical, to respond to questions. So I'll pass over to you, Mr. Noon.
Thank you. As outlined, this is an application that was considered by committee last time. The house had, there's the site there. There was a bungalow there. It had planning permission to demolish. There it is in more detail. Erection of a pair of semi-detached dwellings by way of replacement. There's just the location there, just very quickly. That was the original bungalow. Subsequently, there was a variation of that scheme that was refused because what had happened was the ground levels had been lowered, necessitating the formation of retaining walls. And those were considered objectionable. So that was the variation application. That was the reason for refusal. The appeal decision, when it was dismissed, focused on the incongruous and excessive scale of those retaining walls and the detail of their construction. So we've moved on a little bit there from the layout we now have before us. The retaining walls are sort of along the green sort of garden areas along the side, around the side of the houses. So that's the design we're now looking at. That wasn't specifically a reason for refusal last time. It was those retaining walls. You can see the sections show the extent of the terrace garden at the rear, the terracing that was needed. The elevation at the front, which is section EE, which is that line going across the frontage there, you can see those retaining walls in there, either side. So you can see here, this one just sort of gives you an idea, left and right. The solid grey colour is the retained ground. So you can see there is quite a substantial height to these walls. That is the section to one side there. Top one is what was approved. So you can see the ground levels are quite high, little sort of wall along the top, some retaining structure to the rear. As the bottom one is what was refused. So you can see that great big long sloping wall with the concrete interlocking blocks. The middle one is what is now suggested, with the green dotted bit there is that sort just to show you for reference, you know, roughly where the existing wall is that was refused. So it's lowered down on one side to look like the middle drawing and faced in stone. So the concrete interlocking blocks go. That just gives you some dimensions there, quite useful at the very bottom there. Hopefully that comes up. But at the front of the wall, they're suggesting, you know, they're going to drop it by 1.8 metres. Varying amounts of lowering going on here. You know, just to say, to bring it down from the red line is what was previously refused, and that lowering is what we see to the stepped wall now. And then just on the other side, bottom one, that's what we refused. Middle one is what is now suggested, and then just for reference, as approved, that approval I think has probably gone away now. It's really just there for information. And then again there, just to give you that sort of close-up detail of how much they're suggesting things be reduced. And then just some detail left-hand side, that's what we refuse with sort of concrete interlocking blocks. On the left, that was what was refused. Those will be retained because structurally I think they're doing the necessary job of holding things back. But on the right-hand side, faced in local natural stone, 150mm thick, so sort of real stone, being sort of laid and coursed in an appropriate manner. So to give a stone finish, certainly at the front of the walls where they are visible. Just to give you an idea of the site as it currently exists, work all stopped when all these problems were identified. You can see on the right-hand side, you can just see a bit of that concrete interlocking wall, retaining wall there. So in terms of the key issues, we have a planning history that leads us from an approval of one thing through to an evolution as built that we felt unacceptable, and now to a scheme that attempts to deal with the reasons for refusal of that middle scheme. Key issue really here is the visual impact of those retaining walls, also obviously the impact on neighbourhood amenity, and crucially what caused members a lot of debate last time is ground stability, and we now have the applicant's structural engineer to answer any further questions. The recommendation is of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. Any questions for the officer? No? I will invite Mr. Davis if he'd like to sit up here, and then I'm sure members will have some questions for you, if I can remember from what happened last time. So questions, please, for Mr. Davis. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Davis. Just to pick up on something that our officer just said, you're a geotechnical engineer rather than a structural engineer. Am I correct?
Yes, so strictly speaking, I'm an engineering geologist. So our profession is to predict how the ground is going to behave in response to engineering works.
Thank you. I read your report several times because this has been before us several times. Am I right in summarising it that your report essentially states that the retaining walls are not really retaining walls, but that the ground is sort of self-supporting, and therefore the retaining walls are sort of largely decorative?
That's the gist of it. Yeah, that's correct. Then they're not actually working very hard, and they don't need to.
Thank you. There's a couple of things. So can you explain for lay people, there seems to be an incongruity between statements we had at the last meeting where the applicant said that in the original build they had to dig down deeper than they expected because the ground was so soft, and yet a matter of, well, at the edge of the site, it suddenly becomes self-supporting. To me that seems those seem to be sort of contradictory ideas, and I just wondered how we got there.
Okay, well, there's nothing on this site that I've seen which I describe as soft in the engineering sense. So, but what there is a two different types of ground. One is the rock at depth, and the other on top of the rock is the soil, which is much weaker. It's not soft, but it's much weaker than the rock. So the soil is the stuff you could dig with a spade, and the rock you couldn't dig with a spade in layman's terms. So the weaker material, if you like, the soil on the top, would originally have extended right the way down the natural slope from north to south, and that's probably what is being referred to as soft, in quotes. So that would have gone, that they'd have had to dug out that weaker material in order to get to the rock below.
Okay, and lastly, if I may, Chair, just your report suggests that, so obviously if the ground is self-supporting essentially, the main threat would then be, excuse me, the hydrostatic pressure building up behind the wall in cases where there's a lot of rainfall, etc. And so your report suggests drainage holes, but you don't specify sort of the frequency, diameter, etc. of those. Is that just done on a sort of through experience and knowledge, or should that be specified somewhere?
So there's two things here which you could argue are unsatisfactory. One is the top part of the water is holding that soil, and I think as part of the application, the revised application, that's proposed to be battered back to a stable, so that the wall's coming down in height and the soil slope is being battered back to a stable angle. So that's one issue. And the other issue is that if that wall is going to fail, it's going to fail not through the rock behind it failing, but by water pressure, as you say, building up behind it and pushing it over. So the proposal is to put in some drainage holes, essentially drilling through the facing and into the rock behind it. And all that is to prevent the water pressure building up from behind that wall and putting a force on it. So in terms of the design, it's essentially belts and braces. So you'd put them in at a sufficient interval that you can be confident it's not going to, so the whole thing can drain properly. So perhaps, I don't know, 1.5 metre intervals, that sort of thing.
Thank you. That's me done for the time being.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I got a question, if I may. You said in your presentation then that it could push the wall over. Well, even if the water built up behind, would it not be built strong enough to retain that pressure? Because once you start talking about pushing it over, I mean, that means it's not stable enough to hold back anything.
So all retaining wall should be designed with drainage, and it may hold a certain amount of pressure, but it's always good practice to provide the drainage, so you're never going to get that problem, never get that possibility.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Right, members, we now move into debate. Who would like to start this one? No, Victor's shaking his head. Anyone else like to? Councillor Panel.
Well,
thank you.
We did have a thorough debate last month. We've had the engineer here to answer the questions that we had. I don't think we need to rehearse all the arguments we've had last time. Having heard the engineer and the assurances about the stability, I'm willing to propose the recommendation of approval for this application.
Thank you. Have I got somebody to second that one? Or ask the question? No. Yes, Councillor Wright, seconded.
No, sorry, I wasn't seconding it.
Oh, I see, all right. Right. Further questions? Have we got a seconder? We haven't. Yes.
Yes, I shall second, subject to conditional approval, so.
Yeah, all right. Councillor Abbott, second. Councillor Wright, you want to come back in?
Just on the last point that I raised with Mr. Davis, can we make it an explicit condition that the nature and frequency of the drainage holes be submitted in advance for approval by our team? If the proposer and seconder would accept.
Yeah.
What does the officer say?
Well, on a matter of debate upon that point, we've had the expert opinion, and our planners are experts in planning, but we have heard from I'm sorry, I'm not going to get this right,
Geotechnical.
yeah, in his area of expertise. And so it hasn't been proposed in the plans, any particular scheme. You'd have to do that if the planners were going to agree or not to it.
Can we ask the officer for his
Yes.
view?
Mr. Noon, I pass over to the officer.
Yeah, there's a couple of conditions I think probably largely pick that up. There is a condition, I think it's 8, that requires things to be done in accordance with the geotechnical assessment report. Condition 10 requires the submission of a detailed drainage scheme. There are 1 through about, I was counting them, how many? 1 through 7 points there. We could, if need be, add an 8th point to condition 10 to include that drainage scheme shall include details of the drainage for the wall, for the retaining wall. I'm guessing that drawing doesn't show it, but I'm guessing there's holes drilled through the wall so that the water accumulating behind it can come out. I'm sure they're intending on doing those anyway. And if we could secure the detail of that network of holes, I think that would probably pick that point up as an additional strand of condition 10.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. Are you happy with that, proposed and seconder? Okay, you happy with that, Councillor Ray? Yep. No further questions on this one? Right, I think we can move straight into the vote. All in favour of approval, please. Those against? Abstentions? 1 abstention.
6 for 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. That application is approved. Thank you very much. And thank you for your... Thank you. We'll just have a break whilst the officers change places. We'd like to have a little bit of musical chairs. You tell me when you're ready, Charlotte. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to the second application, which is application number 370324 Full, Unit 8A, Birmingham Workshops. the officer for this one is Charlotte Hirahan. So I think basically we pass straight over to you, Ms. Hirahan, please.
Thank you. So this is an application at Unit A, Ermington Workshops, which is part of an industrial estate on the edge of Ermington. Members went there on Monday, but just as a reminder, it's sort of on the northeastern edge on the road out of Ermington. So the application is for the change of use from a B2 use to a sui generis, specifically a pet cremation unit. Just before I get into the presentation, there are a number of queries came up on Monday at the site visit, which I had to defer to get some answers. So first of all, Councillor Rake asked about the fuel type that was being proposed. There's a sort of a fuel tank indicated. So oil is proposed. You asked if it could run on any alternative fuels, and the answer is it could. We do have, I will just point out, we do have Janet here from Environmental Health, so any more specific questions about these things we can talk about later. So these are just sort of initial answers to the queries. There was a question about the provision of spills and prevention of contamination, because we saw that behind the site there is the water course. Due to the manner of cremation and how the animals are kind of dealt with, there is no risk of contamination to the water course. Councillor Taylor, I think you asked about throughput. So there would be up to 7 cremations per day. So each animal would be done individually. Hours of operation would be restricted. That's recommended as a condition. And the justification for the flue height. So apparently calculations are made on a site-specific basis. And actually the flue height that's proposed here is quite low compared to what you might generally expect for this sort of requirement. Councillor Abbott, you also asked about a flood map. So the unit is this unit here, 8A. So the dark blue is flood zone 3 and the hatched area is flood zone 2. As it's an existing building and it doesn't change the vulnerability classification that the Environment Agency detail for flood risk, we don't have any concerns in terms of flood risk. So as I said, it's change of use from B2 to sui generis, and the key planning issue here really is this a suitable location for the proposed use? As I mentioned on Monday, the proposed use will be subject to a number of other requirements from other organisations. So it's DEFRA's, Animal Health Agency, all sorts of other things. So just to point out, this is really just about the planning merits of the use, and the business will be subject to a number of other things outside of planning. So as you remember from Monday, we are in the middle of an industrial estate. So just to give a bit of an idea of what's around. So you remember we're sort of parked in the middle and then there's this courtyard effect. So Unit 8A is the site. Unit 6 here, we've got a woodworking business, we've got engineering services, we've got West Country Cookers in Unit 15. So a whole range of uses which have, which are industrial in nature and have the associated noise issues, and other sort of issues that you would expect on an industrial estate. This is the unit. As you remember, it's just a single story. It would just be half of this building, so we've got 8A and 8B. A fairly small building compared to the other buildings surrounding it, sort of tucked into the corner of the courtyard. So in terms of external alterations, we've got this flue that's proposed. So we talked on site about how much higher it would be in relation to the existing building. So the ridge height is just slightly over 4 metres, with the flue being 6 metres from ground level. So it would sort of be about half the size of the building again on top of it. So this is the rear elevation. So you wouldn't really see it sort of on the slope, you would just see it poking out the top from the front. I think we spoke about me trying to find the old plans to get some sort of indication of how high the flue would be in relation to the other buildings. I couldn't find them. I spent quite a long time down in the archives. So I've done this very rough. I'm not claiming this is to scale. This is the best that I could do. So the yellow line is the floor level to ridge. The yellow line here is exactly double that. So the building at Unit 6 is more than double the height of the existing building. And then this red line is approximately half of one of these yellow lines. So the flue would be again, very roughly, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as high as the buildings next door. Moving on to kind of residential amenity, we've obviously had quite a lot of objections about this proposal. The nearest dwellings, we've got Pinwell Crescent here, is over 50 metres away, and as members remember from the site visit, there is another industrial unit in between them, as well as the car park and the road. I think you remember we sort of stood in this car park here and were kind of struggling to get a view where we could see all the houses and the building due to their relationship. This is kind of me trying to take a picture of it. So I'm stood at the side of the unit that we're talking about, and then you can just see kind of the tops of the nearest houses with the industrial units and the car parks in between. And again, this is the car park we were stood in. So this is kind of the northeastern end of the residential estate, industrial unit, car parks, and then our building is just out of the way, out of the view here. So as I said, there have been amenity concerns raised by neighbours. As I sort of said, some of them are outside of the scope of planning and would be controlled by other legislation. Given the distance and the separation between the dwellings and the unit, you know, I don't think that there's going to be a harmful impact to amenity. It's also worth remembering that the industrial estate predates the residential estate. So the residential estate was first granted permission in 2012, so it's fairly modern. And as part of that permission, mitigation was implemented, bearing in mind it was next to an existing industrial estate, so an acoustic fence was put up and things like that. As I said, the site is within an existing industrial estate, which already has a range of uses, which could include noise, fumes, things that have been raised by some of the objectors. The existing building is a B2 use, so it could be used for things like car repairs, as a factory, sort of catering. So it could already be used for a range of uses. And it's worth remembering that any potential sources of nuisance, if they were to arise, could be managed outside of planning. So environmental health could investigate if there are any issues, take any action if needed. So the key issues, say it's an existing industrial estate, so it's considered to be a suitable location for the proposed use, bearing in mind the wide range of uses already within Ermington Mill and the distance from residential properties that I've already mentioned. There's parking provision, 2 parking spaces with the proposed unit, which, given how the business would operate, that's considered to be adequate. Given the industrial character of the site, the flue doesn't raise any concerns in terms of landscape impact. And environmental health have considered this application very thoroughly and have recommended conditions. And then just finally, as I said, the business will need to comply with lots of other areas of legislation and regulation. So the recommendation is conditional approval.
Very much, Ms. Before we move on, I got to admit I made a bit of an error because I didn't introduce the other lady that's involved in environmental health, and that's Anita Kidby. She's on screen with us. I hope you can hear us, Anita.
Yes, hi, Councillor Taylor, I'm here.
Thank you. Right, is there any questions for the officer, please? Councillor Abbott.
So, when you say questions for the officer, I want to question other officers, but not Miss Harahan. So, is this the moment, or yes, that's fine. This is the moment? Okay, thank you. You're on. So in the very large industrial complex in Plymouth, where there's incineration of waste, there is monitoring of the flue output and of the plume, which spreads out in various directions at various concentrations, depending on the wind. Will there be monitoring from the flue from the chimney in this particular case?
I think the best way to answer that is to think of the scale here. In this incinerator will only be operating 7 times a day at maximum, each cremation takes about half an hour with a bit of kind of heating up beforehand. But the rest of the time, the incinerator won't be operating at all. It's one of the smallest kind of incinerators you can get, barely bigger than something that you could even get a domestic version of this. The incinerator design is what's described as a compliant appliance. So basically, the burn happens completely within the incinerator. There's an afterburner, and there is kind of abatement equipment within the incinerator. So it's completely designed to deal with anything that might be produced. Also, because it's not general waste, so there's no potential polluting things going in, which is the opposite to the much larger scale incinerators that could have anything going in. So the only in kind of correct operations, if you like, the only emissions are potentially steam or water vapour, which could be visible as a kind of like a little white plume, but we can tell the difference between a water vapour plume and a smoke plume, and the first indication of anything going wrong or not operating properly is smell. So these pet cremators are widely used throughout the country. It's small, it's only operating occasionally. It might not be 7 times a day, it might be 2 or 1 or none. So there's no justification for doing any kind of monitoring. And it would be a question of somebody alerting environmental health to a problem that would kind of precipitate our kind of action, really. So I think, in summary of all of that, I don't think anyone has any concerns in terms of emissions that could be a problem, because essentially it's only an organic thing going in.
Thank you. Of course, anything that's designed to be automatically working properly is exactly why we need monitoring, because technology doesn't always work correctly. To be blunt about the poor pets, we're burning organic waste, which I guess is why there's not the issues, but there may be pollutants, for instance, microchips. Now, the problem for the incinerator in Plymouth is dioxins, and I guess we've got no plastics involved. It'll be just the deceased pet. But we could be putting metals into the atmosphere through microchips, unless they were to be removed first. But maybe also there are plenty of examples of these devices around the country where they are just known, they've been checked to be working properly and without the problems I'm supposing.
As with all incinerating kind of equipment, it's and most kind of high-tech equipment that you get now, it's has inbuilt alarms and fail-safe mechanisms. So it'll be set up to ensure that it can't operate unless it's operating correctly. If there is any kind of failure, the system will shut down. So I don't think that anybody would need to be concerned that the equipment could operate in a kind of blasé way without the operator noticing. The other thing is that the operator needs to be there the whole time it's in use, and as I say, it's short periods. As far as the microchips and things are concerned, I think really it's a bit of a de minimis scenario that, they're so tiny, and I really don't think that there's anything to worry about there. We did consider that sometimes pets do have kind of implants and, you know, false knee joints or whatever. But again, the instance of that is so rare. And just as in a human cremation, those materials don't tend to cremate at the temperatures being, you know, that the machinery is operating at. And therefore they'll be removed, you know, at the end of the burn, so to speak.
Thank you. If it was to be an oil fuel, is it common to have a protecting bund within which the oil tank sits? Because we've heard the argument that the process of burning would not produce pollutants into the water, or indeed, you're arguing, into the air, but the process of storage and is in itself of the fuel is in itself a potential problem, and in other sites there would be a bund. Would we require something?
Well, these days, any oil tank that you buy is what's called a self-bunded tank. So it actually comes as a double skin tank. So there's no need for a kind of you know, a low wall or a collecting area around tanks now. That's kind of you know, been outlawed, if you like, some while ago. So any tank that is able to be purchased will have its own inbuilt bunding. But you are right to raise it, because it's actually pretty rare now for any incinerator to be fueled by oil, and it's something that we, you know, had suggested that perhaps the applicant would be better looking at gas. Now, so she's either got the LPG option, and again, which has its own storage needs, and I presume there's not mains gas, because otherwise she would have done that. So I think that's something that the applicant could probably look at. But from a planning perspective, I think it's a better option to use gas. There may be reasons why she's chosen oil, I don't know. It's extremely expensive compared to gas, so, you know, it may be that she'll change her mind. But again, I don't think you need to be concerned about the potential for the oil to be released.
Thank you.
Councillor Abbott, can I ask a question? Is there a set temperature in which they can use these at, or is that monitored?
Sorry, set temperature. Well, for the incinerator, yeah, it's part of the, you know, the kind of computerized equipment that's there. It will have to reach a certain temperature before it can be loaded, and so yeah, there is a set. It's 850 degrees or something. I can't remember exactly, but it's certainly high enough to do the job in the shortest possible time, which is the way these are designed.
Yeah, because that would cut down emissions as well.
Yes.
So that's fine. Thank you. Councillor next, I think, wanted to come in next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, I'm sorry to put you on the spot again. I think you've answered my question anyway, but we've just been talking about output. How about the smell? Obviously, that's probably quite a concern for the local residents. So would this type of, you know, have you got any background information on other sites that, you know, have had issues with smells? I know you can't compare like with like probably, but you know, have you looked into that?
Yeah, we have actually. I've spoken to some other authorities that have the exact same pet cremator. In Devon, there's several. And the environmental health departments there are kind of reporting that they've operated with no problem at all, and no smell issues. Smells from, I mean, you know, I used to be very familiar with an animal incinerator when I lived near Newton Abbot, and the smells from that were truly horrible. But that's used for cattle and sheep and goodness knows what else. And now it's better regulated, so the smell's gone away. But with these pet cremators, they're all designed with a secondary burning, and the secondary burning is what deals with any potentially polluting gases and smells and things like that. So they're designed so that everything is incinerated, and the only thing that should be emitted is the water vapour. But obviously, when it came in, that's the first concern that we had, to make sure that it's going to be designed and operated so it won't cause a smell. So if there is a smell and residents notice it, or even other people on the industrial estate, then in our kind of report, we're encouraging them to contact environmental health, because the presence of a smell during burning suggests that something isn't right.
Thank you. And if just a quick as a follow-up, fire risk. Obviously, there are a lot of other businesses in the area. Are there adequate fire precautions? Will there be adequate fire precautions be put in place for this sort of activity?
I think the same applies really with the equipment itself and its fail-safe kind of setup and its fail-safe nature. That the piece of equipment is quite substantial metal box essentially, in which the incineration kind of happens. So if there was anything to go wrong, then it's going to shut down automatically. So I don't think that there's any additional fire risk to any of the other units, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Just following on from the question about oil, I note that you said there were alternative fuels that can be used. Is it possible to make it a condition of planning consent that another fuel is recommended? Thank you.
You're being asked to consider the application that's currently before you, and currently before you is oil proposed. So if that's something you're unhappy with, then that would be potentially a reason for refusal, although I would suggest that it wouldn't be a very reasonable reason for refusal, because it's available fuel, it's what the applicant has chosen, and that's what you need to consider today.
Councillor Wright.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair.
You recognise yourself, can you?
Well, I didn't hear the name you said. Can we just sort of complete the throughput pathway? We've talked about the burning process. A number of the representations in objection have referred to ash. Do you have a clear picture of how ash in your head, because I don't, of how ash will be handled and processed?
So the equipment itself includes abatement, like dust abatement kind of equipment, if you like, to make sure that there's no ash or dust emitted via the flue. So at the end of each cremation, then all the ash will be retained within the chamber, and then obviously that's the remains of someone's pet. So the process is that all that ash is taken out. There'll be some kind of grinding mechanism, I think a cremulator it's called, and then all the ashes kind of collected for to be returned to the owner of the pet. So again, the equipment, I think because of it tends to be quite a sensitive matter for a lot of people, the equipment is designed to make sure that all the remains that haven't combusted are able to be collected and returned.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a minimum amount of ash anyway. If you look at what you get out of a crematorium from human beings, it's not a big lot. The wind could blow it away. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, I mean, clearly there's lots of issues that are related to these types of developments, but we need to be sort of focusing our attention on the planning related issues, and there is other legislation in place, you know, which can deal with these issues should anything go wrong. Just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Housesander. Okay, I think no further questions. We'll now move on to Mr. Summers, the objector. When you're ready, sir, you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My presentation is in 5 sections. Section 1, the location. The photo shows approximately 10 metres of cold air trapped in the Irm Valley on a cold morning. It is a visible sign of a phenomenon that exists year-round at the bottom of this narrow, steep-sided valley. Committee members, you have seen the location at river level where chimney exhausts do not go up and away, but spread over the surrounding environment. Section 2, the application. Many false statements and omissions have been made on this application. A false ecology trigger statement has been made and an email reference. The committee have been told the chimney height is only 2 metres above the building, but the manufacturer's dimensions of the incinerator and chimney show this is understated by over 50%, and the chimney is likely to be over 3 metres above the building. There is no mention that pet cremation comes under animal byproducts category 1 licensing. There's a failure to note that the site has no water or drainage. Section 3, the site. The graded interior limited drawings are unprofessional because the rear elevation and floor plan drawings are incorrect. The incinerator has to be moved some 1 metre towards the building centre, but its footprint then blocks the rear door. There is a failure to identify areas where high-risk contamination objects go. For example, that high-risk, it's got a body in it. They fail to show the statutory requirements, e.g. fire, health and safety, etc. Section 4, the environment. 8 false statements regarding serious environmental issues have been made on this application. It is self-evident that there will be contamination inside the building, but without internal cleaning facilities, it is almost inevitable that staff will spread contamination to nearby premises. Contamination will spread to nearby watercourse and in turn the River Irm. Introducing oil 2 metres from the watercourse increases the risk of serious environmental contamination, and the use of oil flies against the face of government legislation or guidelines. Section 5 in summary. This location is wrong. An open country environment, not the bottom of a valley, would be more appropriate, and in a building more suitable than 8A Ermington Workshops. This application presents a serious and irreversible environmental threat. The well-being of local inhabitants, workers, and especially school children using a nearby sports field should be paramount. With the above in mind, can this committee knowingly accept the risks and pass this application? And just out of a point of interest, all the letters of support, only one is a parishioner. Others come as far afield as Salcombe. I'll take questions.
Thank you very much. If you sit tight a minute. Any questions for Mr. Sumner, please? Councillor Reich.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Sumner. Thank you for your presentation. You've heard what our environmental health officer has had to say. What, in your view, you talk about the risks of contamination. I take your point about oil, although, as our planning officer said, another building could come in and could have umpteen oil burners in there, and there'd be no need for them to get planning permission if they were B2. What could you just tell us what, in your view, the risks are?
The animal byproducts are a serious contamination risk. Would you take a bag like that that's had a body in it and just throw it around? Where would you put it? There's no statement as to where it should go. And how do you clean a building that's been contaminated when it's got no water in it? There's got no drains in it. It is impossible to imagine contaminated products lying around a building and having no position for them and not being able to clean the building down. I did ask at the site meeting to have a look inside the building, because if the floor is higher than the outside building, any cleaning materials is going to go off the floor, down outside, and then into the watercourses. Because I can't imagine that the floor inside the building is going to be lower than the outside ground floor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nix.
Yes, thank you, Mr Summers, for your...
Those shouldn't be up there. There was only one supposed to be. I asked for just the first site to be left all the time. No, I was told that it had been, that was there.
Hang on, sir. Sorry.
Saying I was sent the slides and asked to add them to the presentation, so that's what I've done.
Yes, right. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr Summers, you said at the beginning of your presentation that there were lies in it. Why do you think they're lies?
Right. From the application, the wildlife and ecology trigger table, it says there is no work to be done on the roof of the building. So it's just ticked off as an X so that the trigger isn't pulled. Then in the application, it states that there will be a 50mm hole drilled in the roof. But in fact, if you look at the specification for the chimney, it's 500mm, not 50mm. So that's two statements, false statements. In the materials, it says that no materials will be materials are used externally. But there's an oil tank. In the biodiversity and geological conservation, it says under the trigger, it says that this shouldn't be triggered. Under the foul sewage is a false statement. The applicant responded, foul sewage will be via a main sewer. They've got no main sewer. The ABP contamination containers is a false statement. The application says that neither is required. The trade effluent, it doesn't say anything. It's a false statement. They should have some statement about trade effluent. Hazardous materials, it says none. It can't be true. The site visit, the false statement, the chimney will be some 7.2 metres high. Well, if you look at the specifications for the incinerator, that's 3.6 metres high. If you look at the specification, this is the manufacturer specification, it's 3.6 metres high. So that's going to be a total of 7.2. And I dispute the site height of the building at 4.3. It is just about 4 metres. So the chimney, on the plans that have been given, it shows the chimney coming just at the bottom of the roof, where you won't be able to get the incinerator in the building under that chimney. The chimney's got to go up the roof farther to get the incinerator underneath it. And then moving the incinerator into the building means you can't use the back door.
Mr. Sumner, I think that's presumption. where they're going to be. I mean, that's not on a plan application. It's going to be placed.
The drawings that attach to it do.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that seems to be...
But you said, I beg your pardon, I don't want to argue, but they said planning considerations, and there's a planning document.
Can I let Southender or Howhan?
Yeah, I just want to address a couple of the points there. So in terms of the height of the chimney and the building, we have been provided with scaled plans by the applicant which show the heights as I've measured and as I showed. If the development takes place and it is not that height, then that would be contrary to the approved plans. We could take action against that. So we have to go, we've got the scale plans which show a 6 metre, it scales as being 6 metres, and that is what would be approved. If for any reason a higher chimney came in, as I've just said, that's something that we could investigate as a breach of planning. In terms of the ecology report, so When the application first came in, it didn't include the flue, it was just a change of use. So we didn't ask for an ecology report because there weren't any works to the roof at that point. The flue was then added, and we have taken the view that given that people have been in the roof fairly recently, sort of clearing out, it's a modern building, we took the view that it wasn't necessary to ask for an ecology report at that stage once the application was in. If that is something that members felt strongly about, then that is something that could be requested. But our view was that given the condition, you know, where the building is, the modern nature of it, the fact people have been in clearing out the roof recently, that it wasn't necessary. But that is something that you could ask for if you wanted to.
Councillor Allen, have you got a question on a different point?
Yes, it was. Right, it was your first point about which you can see in this picture here, actually, about the mist lying in the valley. Could you?
About 10 metres. That's just a visible.
What's?
I'm sorry. That's just a visible sign in certain conditions.
Right. What is your main concern about? So that you think that the smoke coming from the chimney won't rise? It will.
Yes, because the environment which the chimney, this operation is planned for, is in a steep, narrow valley, steep sides, and the phenomenon of cold air over the river is permanently there. And although it just shows up on a particular day when you've got cold air and mist, the air over that back to about 10 metres is the same throughout the year. So exhaust from the chimney doesn't go up and away. It goes up a little bit and then it spreads out over the area, and it will spread out over those properties, over the school children's playing fields.
Is it possible to get a response to that? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully, I can help here. I completely understand where Mr. Summers is coming from. In terms of if you think of smoke from domestic fires and things, you can sometimes see them dribbling out the top of the chimney and spreading flat, and bonfires, that kind of thing. Incinerators are designed in a completely different way. They're operating at a very much higher temperature. And as I say, they've got afterburners, which obviously bonfires and things like that don't have. And the emissions are essentially likely to be water vapour, water droplets of steam, that kind of thing. The other thing is that the flue height calculation takes into account the need for the emissions to go vertically upwards, and I've specifically asked for a particular type of terminal on the flue, which basically gives it extra lift as well. So all in all, the design of the incinerator, the afterburner mechanism, the height of the flue, the temperature of the gases, and the flue terminal acting together should be sufficient to kind of deal with any fears about the gases not dispersing properly. The other thing is that should that happen, that there is a problem and it does spread out, as I mentioned before, the first indication of that won't be what you can see. It'll be a smell, and any kind of smell indicates a problem, and that's when environmental health can step in.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace.
There was a lot of shoulds there's and no wills, I'm afraid.
I think that, Mr. Wallace, you've made your point, and I believe now you've got your answer, and I don't think we can qualify any further on that one because they've explained, and the environmental people have actually looked into all this, and they're happy with what's going to happen. And I think with the temperatures they cook at, incinerate that. Sorry, not cook. It is steam. It is steam, and not. It is steam and not fumes, as it would be in a bonfire. So I think we're going to have to
make one more point about the operation.
It's questions, Chair.
No, we need to go on to members' questions.
It was mentioned the question was asked about how the ash was dealt with. Question was asked about how the ash was dealt with. The ash is in the incinerator afterwards, and a hydraulic lift comes up in front of the machine, and the ash is raked out of the machine onto a tray. That tray is then moved, and the ash is then tipped with bones in it. It is then tipped into a cremulator, which grinds it all down. So ash is being moved around the premises. There's no windows can be opened.
Excuse me, have you got expertise in this then?
I
ash?
have certainly read the explanation with the documents that have been provided.
As opposed in personal expertise, are you bringing that to the table?
I've got no expertise other than reading the drawings and the specifications and how to use the equipment from the manufacturer.
Okay, I think move on. Is there any other further questions?
I'd be grateful if we could get a response to the lack of sewage and the lack of drainage. I think that's an important point. Thank you.
Yeah, that's back to Charlotte. To the question for Charlotte, not Mr. Sumner. So thank you, Mr. Sumner. I'll let you stand down. Well, I think yeah, Georgina, I think you're the last one to ask the question. No more after that. So you're happy with what? Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought I'd put a floor plan in, but I haven't, so sorry about that. Again, you know, to sort of repeat what I keep saying for everything, environmental health are happy with what's been proposed, and given the way that the animals are managed, we don't anticipate that there's going to be sort of foul drainage. Yeah.
So there isn't actually any water in the premises?
I don't honestly know, to be perfectly frank.
All right.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, you know, whether there's kind of water or sewage or whatever for toilet and washing facilities for the people working there, that's obviously for the site and the site kind of managers to know about. But in terms of the actual process, you know, animals will come in some kind of bag or wrapping or whatever. They'll either come in and go directly into the incinerator, or they'll be put directly into a chest freezer. And so therefore there's those two options basically remove any potential for any bodily fluids or anything like that to be spilled on the floor. And bearing in mind that other than, you know, dogs that die at home, all of these animals will have come via the vet or via, you know, picked up on the road or, you know, wherever they're going to be sourced from. So all of them will have had some kind of containment before they even get there. So we're not concerned at all about any kind of contaminated material within the building. And there certainly won't be any need for any wash down water. I mean, it's a very small contained process. It's not the same as a human crematorium, which has the cremulator and the hydraulic lift and all that, but it's explained. This doesn't have that, and it's not the same as a farm animal incinerator, which is, let's face it, a lot bigger and a lot more messy. Okay.
And at disposal, the objector also mentioned the fact that there wasn't any specific way of disposing any of the bags that came in, put in a bag. Do we know anything about how they're expected to dispose of contaminated materials?
Well, any of the materials that the carcasses are wrapped in will either be suitable for going in that type of incinerator, so lock, stock and barrel basically, or not. and it's for the operator to make sure that the only things that go in the incinerator are things that are suitable for the incinerator, and if not, then she'll have to make her own arrangements for commercial waste disposal like any other commercial business.
So when you say if right to go into the incinerator, I mean, these are plastic bags, aren't they?
Not necessarily.
No.
Not the ones I've seen.
Oh, so you're talking about sort of organic material wrapping up?
Yeah, the vets that I'm familiar with don't use plastic bags.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, I will move on to the supporter, and as a statement will be read out by the clerk. Thank you.
Many pet owners may need a cremation service for various reasons. Firstly, losing a pet can be an emotional and difficult experience, and having a proper farewell can provide closure. Unfortunately, there's been a concerning trend reported in the media about increasing numbers of people disposing of their deceased pets improperly, such as in black bins or leaving them in natural areas like woods or near streams. This not only disrespects the memory of the beloved pets, but can also lead to environmental issues. The cremation service aims to provide a respectful and dignified option, specifically for low-income families who may face financial challenges during this difficult time. By offering affordable services and payment plans, we can help ensure that every pet receives the respectful treatment it deserves. I'm also interested in collaborating with organisations like the PDSA, local police and councils to spread awareness about ethical pet end-of-life options and encourage proper disposal methods. This service would not only fulfil a practical need, but also promote a sense of community support. It would demonstrate our commitment to ensuring that all families, regardless of their financial situation, can access compassionate end-of-life care for their pets. Additionally, it could provide educational resources on grief support and responsible pet ownership, further enhancing the community's well-being. Opening a pet cremation service in the Ermington Mill Industrial Estate is a great idea. Several vacant spaces are available, and it would be a perfect access point for my work route. I'm excited to collaborate with local small businesses like sketch artists and engravers, card makers and printers, giving them a platform to showcase and sell their amazing creations through my small business. Thank you for taking the time to consider my planning application. Warmest regards, Faye Goodman, Goodman's Pet Cremations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no way of questioning that.
Yeah, but you could comment on it.
If you want to make it. Yeah. Debate. Yeah, you can do that in the debate. Okay. Right, move on now to Councillor Owens, Ermington Council. Thank you, sir. And you know the process. 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good morning, councillors. I present this on behalf of Ermington Parish Council, who objected against the proposal, and I have next slide please, 5 reasons, major reasons, planning reasons why we have rejected it. The first one is an inconsistency, we believe, in District Council policy on the development of an oil-fired incinerator. We've already heard about that it is oil-fired, it's not alternatively fuelled. And I'm suggesting that this is inconsistent with the decarbonisation policies that the council have. Councils across the road, across the country, are operating decarbonisation policies. And it just strikes me odd that many councils are removing oil-fired applications, and here we are encouraging an installation of an oil-fired incinerator on council property. Second point, I will want to talk about the stack. Not so much the height's been discussed, but the point is it is a stack and there are no other stacks on this site. Therefore, because it's an introduction of stack, it will change the appearance of the industrial estate. Moving on to the smell of burning flesh,
as I understand, it's very difficult to get rid of the odour created by burning flesh. It just does not go away. The pollutants might not be there, but the detection of smell is very easy. Moving on, the adequacy of parking. I'm thinking that there are two spaces there, and it's the transport of the dead animals to the crematorium. And also, this is distressing for those owners, and also would be offensive to people looking on. The oil tanker, which will have to deliver the oil, where's that going to park? How's it going to get there? And of course, I want to talk about the risk of pollution of a potential oil spill. If an oil spill occurred in filling the tank, it would go drain directly into the watercourse and into the River Erm. So those are the 5 points. My major point is the inconsistency with decarbonisation policy, the appearance of a high stack, the smell of burning flesh, the adequacy of the parking I don't think is sufficient for general use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I think the question of the odour has been answered by our environmental lady. But questions, please, for this gentleman. Councillor Allen.
Hi. So you talk about the adequacy of parking, and I note also in some of the other objections there was concern because of a community parking scheme. Could you give us a bit more information about that, please?
We wanted stipulated that there is a need for parking in Ermington. There are no public car parks in Ermington, and we have agreed that the community can use the car parks in the evenings and at the weekends. So there needs to be a stipulation that when outside the hours of 8 till 6, outside those hours, Monday to Friday, that a car park can be used by the public.
As far as I understand, the crematorium won't be used at that time. So why is that a particular concern? Isn't that just a conversation between?
Councillor Allen, this is not a planning application. This is not in the plan application.
Right,
It's
yeah.
outside. It's on private land, basically. So we haven't got any jurisdiction over there. The questions?
Chairman, I think the parking, I think
yes,
it's a question of parking on the council's land. But that's a matter for the council as landowner, not as planning authority. And that's, you're here today as the planning authority.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rake.
Just, I mean, presumably other things, this is a light industrial estate, so presumably other things get delivered by relatively large vehicles. I'm just thinking in terms of the access for oil delivery. I mean, this wouldn't be the first time they've seen a lorry on the site.
Yeah, I could understand that point, yes. But there would be a difficulty, the lorry parking on the two available sites to deliver oil to the tank, which is around the side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Owens. Have we got a statement from Ermington and Ugborough Ward?
Right, this is a statement from Councillor De Winter, Ward Member. This planning application has caused concern in Ermington Village, with the majority of people expressing an opinion, arguing that permission should not be granted. Most of the points raised have been addressed by the planning officer in her report. In this statement, I would seek to highlight the questions that remain unanswered. I've also included a table listing points submitted by residents and assurance or mitigation relating to those points drawn either from legislation or the planning officer's report. Questions that remain unanswered. The most relevant arguments against the granting of permission for the pet crematorium are those that cite environmental concerns. Pollution. There is a leat in Ermington Industrial Estate that empties into the Erm. Concern was raised about pollution of this watercourse with wastewater, ash or diesel. Of particular concern is the impact on biodiversity in the Erm. The question of wastewater is explained in the table below. Ash is high in sodium and has a high pH, so would affect biodiversity if it reached the leat in significant amounts. No mention was made to this in the report or to the effects of diesel and how these can be mitigated. It is possible that these come under the remit of the APHA, but I suggest that this should be clarified before permission is given. Carbon emissions. The extant Plymouth and South West Devon Joint Local Plan, Policy SPT1 Part 1, states that planning should strive for sustainable economy where 1. Opportunities for business growth are both encouraged and supported. 2. Environmentally conscious business development takes place. 3. Strategically important economic assets are protected for the purpose of economic activity. 4. A low carbon economy is promoted. As far as planning application is concerned, the key points are 1 and 4. As explained in the planning officer's report, the business clearly meets point 1, but as this crematorium will burn oil, it does not adhere to the JLP's low carbon aspirations iterated by point 4. PET 200, the cremator that will be used, can burn diesel, LPG or natural gases. It is likely that sustainable fuels are not sufficient to reach the high temperatures required to adequately incinerate carcasses. This reliance on fossil fuels should be borne in mind by the DMC. Part 3 of Policy SPT also states the intent to promote a low-carbon economy by stating the effective use of land is made for development through optimising reuse of previously developed sites, therefore reducing the need for greenfield development, protecting natural assets and creating opportunities for viable low-carbon energy schemes. This development clearly optimises the reuse of previously developed sites, but as it burns oil, it could be argued that it isn't creating an opportunity for viable low-carbon energy schemes. In conclusion, the planning officer's report should reassure residents regarding the most of the objections they raise. However, I asked DMC to consider the points above when deciding whether to pass its application for change. She's also submitted a table in response to some of the questions raised by residents. So, air pollution. For incinerators burning more than 50 kg per hour, the UK government requires approval and annual inspections with Animal and Plant Health Authority, in brackets APHA. To pass this approval process, the incinerator must meet certain standards as an approved list of incinerators is published by the UK government. The PET 200 is one of these. These standards ensure that there will be no air pollution if the unit is operated as per manufacturer's instructions. APHA approval requires submission of control checks and records of the incinerator. Water-course pollution, waste, water, ash and diesel. Water waste monitoring is done by Animal and Plant Health Authority, which is a government body who will inspect the business prior to commencement of operations and annually thereafter. Their regulations state that wastewater or water used to put out a fire on site must not reach livestock or feed within 21 days of discharge from the site. As explained, monitoring of this is an APHA responsibility. Ash, statement unanswered. Diesel, statement unanswered. Proximity to housing. This cremator will be more than 50 metres from the nearest residential dwelling. Impact on traffic through Ermington. South Hams District Council are not concerned by this as the cremator is a low capacity. Access for oil tankers. There are no specific regulation. Given the range of uses within the industrial estate currently, any number of size of vehicles could legitimately be going to and from the site, and this is not something that South Hams District Council could control. Safety of oil storage. The incinerator will run on oil, and this will be stored in an oil tank on the unit. Risk of flood to unit. As the building is already in place and the proposed change of use would not represent a more vulnerable use in terms of flood risk, there are no specific provisions. However, the planning statement details measures in place to prevent contamination, spills, etc. Biodiversity impact if a leak. See statement as unanswered. Storage of carcasses and concerns around diesel transmission if the animal was carrying a disease when it died. UK legislation does not allow low-capacity incinerators to incinerate animals suspected or confirmed of being infected by transmissible spongiform encephalitis or animal with residues of environmental contaminants or animal body parts collected during the treatment of water waste. The risk of disease transmission from pets to humans after the death of a pet occurs before cremation. Infections can be transmitted in fluid from the pet. All carcasses have to be stored in leak-proof containers, and this is inspected by the APHA. After cremation, all bacteria, viruses, parasites will have been destroyed, and there is no further risk of transmission. Storage of ash while awaiting collection, not relevant to planning policy. Transfer of ash between the cremator and ash storage and the risk of leak to the outside. Planning Permission has a condition that windows and doors should be closed during operation of the unit to prevent leaks to the outside. Opening hours versus operating hours. South Hams District Council will apply a condition stating that operating hours will match opening hours and are restricted to 8 AM to 5 PM Monday to Friday. No operation or opening at weekends or bank holidays. Light industrial units in the estate, any restriction what can be there, any reason to keep it to artisans. According to planning regulation, this pet crematorium is defined as light industrial and therefore supported under the JLP. Monitoring of emissions, how, when, who against which standards. Planning Permission has a condition applied that an odour management plan must be submitted before operation commences. Any training or qualifications needed to operation and clean the incinerator. APHA will monitor, control, checks and records of the incinerator. This is not part of planning policy. Disposal of ash not collected. By law, ash can be disposed of in landfill. Building regs for chimney, including how high it should be. See officer's report. On the manufacturer's website, the flue is 360 centimetres high. It is not clear why it needs to be 600 centimetres high in this development. Owner's own management plan is not detailed enough. South Hams District Council requested a more detailed plan. Maintenance. For continued APHA approval, must have written confirmation from a qualified service person that incinerator has been serviced at least once a year and is in full working order. Burning oil. Against climate policy, also concerned that oil might leak or spill into the leat. Concerns have been raised about registration of this company. I cannot comment on this as I do not understand the legal aspects of the company registration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can't question the ward member, but I'm sure that members will have picked up some questions they need to ask relevant to what Mr. Winters actually commented on. So we move on now, please, if we may. We can't question that, but we can move into the debate and you can talk about it.
Can I just ask a question of the officers? The application just says to a pet cremation unit. Is there any indication of the maximum size of a pet which can be dealt with by this unit? Because obviously pets come in different shapes and sizes. We think of cats and dogs and possibly smaller ones, but there might be larger ones. Is there a limit on the size of animal that the unit can handle?
Yeah, I can answer that. I did look at into that myself. And the actual equipment does have a physical size and weight limit stated. So when the company accepts the task, if you like, of taking a pet, they have the responsibility to make sure that it's going to fit, basically. So some of those extremely large dogs wouldn't be able to be cremated in this way. They'd have to use a different facility.
So we can go up to a large dog, but not a massive dog, as it were, that sort of size.
Yes.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you. You mentioned before that some of the it was possible that a pet that was going to be cremated would be a roadkill potentially. How would we then know that that particular animal could have a disease or not? Because you also said that there wouldn't be any diseased animals going into the oven, whatever you call it. Oven doesn't sound quite right, but
I think it was.
I know what you're going to say, but I'd like that answered anyway. Thank you.
I think it will be a question of for the operator to decide whether or not any particular animal they've been asked to collect is suitable for their process.
Sorry, Councillor Allen,
yeah.
I don't think that's relevant because,
No.
I mean, who knows? And we don't know that, and the officers wouldn't know that either. I mean, normally on roadkill they get knocked down.
If it's being said that there won't be any animals who have disease going into being incinerated, it would be good to know how we would know that.
We won't know that. That's the problem.
Chairman, it's a question of what are the planning consequences of that, and there aren't any. That's why it's an irrelevant question.
I suppose I was just picking up on something that couldn't be proved, because if it's a statement and it can't be proved, then it shouldn't be a statement. But thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Rake.
Thank you. Can we have a little bit of guidance? So there's been a lot of discussion of the fact that this is an oil-fired cremation unit, and setting that against our various decarbonisation policies. I mean, in my mind, we split out the planning decarbonisation and the use decarbonisation. Is that sort of in broad terms a correct statement of how we should approach this? Because I mean, we say that houses, for instance, should be insulated to a certain degree. We don't tell people how often they can have the lights on, or at what temperature they can run it. So it seems to me that, although I regret the fact that it's oil-fired, that's also sort of at the very limit, if not beyond our purview.
Mr. Fairbairn, would you like to answer this one?
Yes, Chairman. I think the issue here is one as we are landowner and also as planning authority, and as planning authority, the types of policy you described and considered in terms of housing and the standards there to be met. That's planning policy. There's a development plan policy to that effect. In terms of the council decarbonisation policies, they are not planning policies. They are policies that the council has decided to adopt, and therefore would be relevant to any consideration as to whether or not that use was an appropriate use for council land, with the council wearing its landowner's hat. It's not it's a consideration. Those policies should have been considered at the time of saying we'll grant the licence or the lease of this property, not necessarily here.
So if I can translate that into me speak, we might approve it as a planning matter, but it might be argued that we should not have granted the lease as a landowner matter.
You understand correctly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fairbairn. Any further questions?
At the risk of being annoying, the oil tanks, is the oil tank not part of planning, or is that something separate?
So the fact that an oil tank is proposed is obviously something we consider. You know, we have the policies in relation to low carbon development, but in this case, you know, everything in planning is a balance. Given the scale of the use, you know, given the size of the building, the amount of use, weighing that up against, you know, even in sort of low carbon terms, they're using a vacant building. They're not proposing to build a new building, which would have its own carbon impact. We've also, you know, then got the positives in terms of, you know, encouraging new local businesses, you know, as I say, bringing a redundant building back into use. So, yeah, whilst, you know, members may feel that the use of oil isn't great, we need to weigh that up against the other benefits, not just in terms of carbon and reusing buildings and things like that, but also the wider planning balance of other benefits of the proposal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Dummett.
Can we talk about the risk associated with refilling the oil tanks and how very close it is to the leak and spillages are going to go directly into water and into the earth?
I think, Councillor, that's beyond our remit.
Well, I think the only thing that I would mention in planning terms for that, because as we've said, things like that are also covered by their own regulations. It's an existing B2 unit. It could be used for something that needs to have oil tankers brought to it every day from tomorrow, and we would have no way to control that. B2 use covers a range of industrial uses. So I think really the question is the proposed change of use going to make that any worse than what could happen at the moment?
Mr. Fairburn.
If I could just also come in as well. Planning policy talks about unacceptable risk. And so when you're assessing the risk, it's the likelihood and frequency that creates the risk. So in planning terms, you have to decide that that the refilling of the tank, if you're going to, if it was going to be a reason for refusal, would have to be unacceptable. So very high level of risk, and with high level consequences to the natural environment.
Would this not count as that?
It's whether the risk is unacceptable in terms of the scale of the risk, and we're talking here of how often are we filling the tank? But
well, that's the missing information, isn't it?
But you've got no evidence, so you're not in a position to say no, I would suggest.
Or be happy to say yes?
Councillor, not Councillor, sorry. Officer.
I think there are clearly concerns about the nature of the development proposed, but we in this forum must focus our attention on just the planning related issues. The oil tank, as has been described by the environmental health lady, is a modern one with double skin, did we say? And there are lots of oil-fired processes happening around the country, and the days of oil spillage in those scenarios are probably gone. And actually, what we're they sometimes they might even have a sealed process where they screw something into it in order to fill it. So the chances of oil spills, I think, are incredibly slim. I'm not an expert, but I think I would be happy to say that is probably where we are with that. Yes, there may be a small chance, but I don't know that that's a significant enough chance for us to warrant refusing this application just on that basis.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ray.
Sorry, just again for clarification, Charlotte, you mentioned, as we've discussed, that this is an existing B2 use, and therefore people could have put oil-fired processes in place already. If the oil tank for such processes was external, would that require a planning application, or
there are certain developments that can happen to industrial units under permitted development. I haven't got that in my head at the moment, and probably Charlotte hasn't either. If that's something that members are really keen that we find out before you make the decision, then I'm sure we can do something in order to do that. But I think oil tanks, certainly from a domestic perspective, often are permitted development. And I would suggest that there's probably something similar for industrial units, but I can't tell you the size, and I can't give you the details at this moment in time.
Thank you. And if I may, Chair, just quickly as a follow-up, are we if we were to approve this application, would that be it? Would we be because it's a change of use and the drawings are sort of in support of that. So I'm just wondering if the applicant saw the light and decided to go for LPG instead, for instance, would that require a further application, or are we locking in this technology?
No, so unfortunately it'd be helpful if I'd remember to put the floor plan in, but it just is described as fuel tank. It doesn't specify oil tank. So we wouldn't be prescriptive and say that it has to be oil. If they you know, for whatever reason, you know, decided that they could use an alternative fuel, that wouldn't need any change of planning because it's just labelled as a fuel tank.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Do we have a proposal on this one, then, please? Oh yes, this is the debate.
No, we haven't moved it.
It should have been the debate. I did say that.
You have one final question with regards to it not having water or sewage, and people being able to come from there, not via a vet's because it's not associated with a vet's, like people bringing their dead animals from home. Is there requirements put on those people to have them contained in a certain way, or are these animals just coming out of a car boot? And I feel like the lack of water and sewage is a worrying aspect for me.
Yeah, I have actually discussed this very thing with the applicant, and for a number of reasons, I have strongly recommended to her that she does not have members of the public visiting the site. So their kind of way of dealing with their customers essentially is going to be to collect the dog from its home or the vet or whoever else has got it, bring it back to their site for the incineration, and then to take the ashes back home. So she has agreed, and I think it is in one of her plans, that that's what they're going to do, for the reasons that you suggest, and other reasons. I think it's not ideal for members of the public to be bringing their own animals there, not least because of the impact it might have on other people working in the area and whatever. It's not a service that she needs to offer. So I think she's realised that she doesn't need to do that. But again, not a planning consideration.
Sorry, councillors, I thought you understood we were in debate, but I think, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you.
It's much more involved than I originally expected. I think that last point would need to be made a condition should this be granted. But even so, it really worries me that there aren't any hand washing facilities. And I mean, everybody needs hand washing facilities. You're going to go from incinerating 3.5 pets in the morning and then have your lunch eating a sandwich to 3.5 after. And, well, that just makes it sound as though it's a non-suitable location. But there's a garage next door. Surely the ladies and gentlemen working in the garage would have facilities. There must be some facilities somewhere. So I hope that can come out in the discussion. Then the statement was made that the drawings show the incinerator and the attached chimney to be incorrectly shown, and I can imagine one has a drawing from ground level. It's a reference surface, and so to say that it's 6 metres tall from the floor, that doesn't mean it's coming out at ground level, but I think that's a matter of it's a query in my mind about how that is. It's the actual height of the chimney which is or isn't allowing the hot gases. The first burning at 850, the second at 1100, something like that perhaps, to be able to punch through an inversion layer and to be able to disperse. As far as I understand, and I take your expert opinion directly, I have no problem, that there won't be a smell. So the challenge that there would be a smell, that shows there's something wrong. and so it would immediately be questioned by this body I'd never heard of before, with A's and P's in it. The worry I have of seeing a plastic bag is we get back to dioxins. To incinerate plastic and not have dioxins is a fundamental health issue. And if the PET is to be collected from a home as a matter of condition, then maybe the collection material can be. I mean, the owner will not want to be having any bodily products in the boot of their van or the car, so they'll be using something. I can just imagine that the oh dear, I'm getting old. You might have a PET in a red plastic bag, and you'd want to get rid of it, so you just stuff it all in the incinerator, and that would be terrible. If there is any plastic involved, it has to be separately disposed of in a secure system and taken to the incinerator, which is presumably the one at Plymouth, which can deal with plastics. But I'm shown a plastic bag, and then I'm worried. If it's non-plastic material, organic material, then there's no problem, because we've got the same incineration temperatures that will permit that. So those are my 3 points, and I'd be glad to discuss more with my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I believe that the question of plastic bags, and that was answered before. So can we come? Yes, please.
Yeah. So as Janet mentioned, and stop. Correct me if I get this wrong. So vets and people like that use organic materials which can go straight in the incinerator. But if it is a plastic bag, then the applicant or the operator of the machine has to make their own arrangements to dispose of that. So plastic bags won't be going in the incinerator. Is that right? And to be fair, that's also not really a planning matter. That would be something for the regulator to control.
Thank you. Anything further on this one? Councillor Allen.
Yes, I'd agree with all Councillor Abbott's points. I also think that I would feel a lot more comfortable if there were actual written plans for all of these things. So what to do if an animal is diseased, what to do with plastic bags, lack of sewage, lack of drainage, lack of water. It is concerning, and I totally understand that all of the points that the experts made, but I can also understand from residents' point of view that the fact that these are unanswered is raising concerns with them.
Thank you.
Could I just?
Yes, please.
I think I completely understand your concerns, and I completely understand the issues. But it will be a regulated activity, and that activity, by other bodies, and as you said, by the body that you've never heard of, Councillor Abbott. There are lots of regulations on these sorts of things, and I appreciate that this is a very sensitive issue for you all, but it's not a planning matter.
Isn't drainage and sewage planning?
If, as we are advised, there is no need for drainage and sewage, then no. Yeah.
If it comes from the vets, of course, any disease would be identified at that stage, because they would know why they were put down, or why they need to be put down, or why they've died. So I think that's covered on several points, but not completely.
Thank you, Chair. I do really understand some of the members' concerns around oil storage, but those of us who have been on other committees and understand risk assessments know that a consequence of an action, however big, so long as the risk is very low, it will still score very low on a risk assessment. So I've got half an eye on the legal team as I say this, but that's a consideration if you're worried about oil storage, because at the end of the day, if there are things in place to mitigate the risk, however large the consequence, it'll score low on a risk assessment. And risk assessments are there to show that with business models and business applications and whatnot. So I thought that might be useful for members to know. In terms of our environmental advice, is sound. You know, we've had plenty of comments on the environmental side. Regardless of the situation of no running water and drainage, which for me would be a concern, based on the nature of the work that's being done there, I still fail to understand how it can't be a planning matter. But perhaps I can still be educated on that. But on balance, which is at the end of the day what we're here to do, on balance, because it's a small business and the risk assessment presumably on the oil storage will be low, and as I said, the environmental advice is sound, I'm struggling to find a reason to reject this application so far, but happy to be persuaded by some of my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Oram. I think Councillor Nix.
Yeah, I'm sorry to come back to this again, but this thing about water really concerns me because, you know, it might be that everything's contained in a box and it goes straight in, etc. But at some point, you've got to wash the incinerator and you've got to wash the floor and you've got to wash the freezer. So I don't understand why. And I know, again, this is for the body, for the thing, but I don't think our questions are being answered. And I do understand in the back of my head, my head is going, this isn't to do with planning, this isn't to do with planning. However, these are obviously really concerning, environmentally, etc. That we're just going round and round in circles really for these few things. The concerns about the impact on the environment, the concerns for the welfare of the staff who are in there, you know, that they haven't got those facilities to keep themselves and their environment clean, and we've got to look at those.
As I said before, I absolutely get that you have concerns on this. The issue that we have to or you have to think about is we are being asked if a change of use of this unit is acceptable in planning terms. If we grant consent and they start to operate and they don't meet environmental health regulations, other regulations, even regulations for us as a landowner, then they would have to stop doing that work. So what you're being asked to consider is the change of use of this unit to an incinerator for pets is acceptable in planning terms, and if you think it's not, then you would need to make go for a refusal. But in planning terms, the officer has recommended approval because there are no planning issues with regard to this use.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell.
Sorry, just to add to that, you know, if, for example, to kind of carry on what Jack was saying, if the regulator goes out and says, actually, you've got no hand washing facility, so you can't operate, you don't need planning permission to then put in a sink. So, you know, that stuff could be added in if required by other bodies without needing to come back to us.
Thank you. Councillor Pennell.
Can I just ask for information? Are there communal hand washing and toilet facilities on the industrial estate for people to use?
I don't know.
Right. Councillor Dummett.
Can I... So we are only deciding on planning permission. If we go ahead and give planning permission, do they also need to then apply for permission from the APHA and Environmental Health, or do they work and then if they do something bad, they get told to stop?
Well, I can answer that question, and also hopefully I can try and help a bit with your water concern. Obviously, the responsibility for providing basic facilities to any workplace unit lies with the landlord and landowner. So That's that. But not a planning issue, as was explained earlier on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the Animal and Plant Health Agency at APHA. They will require the premises and the systems and the management plan to be licensed, and they have to obtain that license before they can start operating. The third thing about environmental health, some incinerators require an environmental permit, but this one is built as, I think I explained earlier on, as an exempt appliance. So basically, it's got all its necessary built-in controls, and there's a limit on the actual burn rate. So that doesn't need an environmental permit itself. However, all the nuisance provisions that we have in environmental health for odour, noise, dust would still apply. And if there was a situation where the process was operating and causing nuisance, then we would take our normal abatement procedures, which could include preventing them using the equipment until it's compliant. So I think hopefully that kind of ties up all of those final questions on those matters.
Thank you. So with what's on the screen of conditional approval, the last point, could we, or is it already written in that we require the permission of the APHA to?
No, that's separate legislation. So planning can't control requirements for other legislation.
So we can't say we give you approval as long as you pass all of the legal requirements.
So, Sander.
So I just wanted to point out, I've asked the question of our assets team as to whether or not there are communal toilet facilities on the site, and there are.
There are.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Allen?
I suppose there's lots of sort of catch-22s in this. I mean, you know, concerns about water, but because there's no need for water, it doesn't become planning. Feels a bit like a catch-22 black hole of something. The key issues, sorry, this is the debate rather than asking a question. Existing industrial estate considered suitable location for proposed use. That's the planning issue. But if the proposed use is something that we have concerns about, obviously that comes a planning issue, doesn't it? So the concerns due to lack of water, which seems to me essential. I mean, you were talking about the people who work there going to the houses to pick them up. If they haven't washed their boots, if they can't wash their hands before they go into other people's houses to pick up their diseased pets, that's also an environmental health. I mean, I used to work in early years, and spreading of diseases through unwashed hands is key, I would have thought. So all of these issues, how are they not planning when it comes to the first key issue? That's not necessarily a question. It's a point in debate. I mean, if it is a question, then you'll please answer it, or if you'd like to answer it. But yeah, that's sticking in my throat a bit.
I mean, yeah, I think, you know, if we granted permission and they tried to operate and there were things that they had not done, like put a sink in, which wouldn't need planning permission, then other regulators will have to step in. But equally, I think, as the environmental health lady was saying, they need a licence, and in order to have a licence, they may need a sink, which is absolutely fine under those regulations. But we can't ask for it under planning because we have no policy which we could hang it on.
I totally understand that. I think it's cart and horse, isn't it? It's quite hard to give planning permission into a great unknown when we sort of feel that these things are key. It would have been a lot easier if they'd got their licence and then we were asked for planning. So I think that's the problem I'm sticking with a bit.
If we maybe talked about it as a in a different scenario. So say there was an application to change the use to a use which required a lot of toing and froing, say, a retail unit in an industrial estate, which we wouldn't normally approve, but if it was something like that, they would also have to comply potentially with other regulations, but that doesn't mean it's wrong in planning terms. It just means there are other regulations they need to meet. So we could grant this now, and then it never be operational because it hasn't met other requirements. So I think the licensing issue is really important, and if they can't gain that license, then they can't operate. End of. Even though they've got planning permission.
And if they break the terms of their licence, they'll get shut down overnight. As simple as that. Councillor, I think Councillor Panel wanted to come first today. No, Councillor Abbott.
I missed that joke. Get that later. So, thank you for this long debate. At one stage, I was thinking we had to have a serious word with the landowner, but I think we've got. but I think we've gone through in great detail, and it is difficult. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been doing this. I am going to propose that this goes ahead under planning. We've heard the arguments. I can't see planning objections. I would like there to be a condition which could be phrased in in two ways. I would like there to be no pet owners coming on site. Whether that's phrased as machine gun at the or whether you say that the company, the business, must only bring in animals for its business by visiting residents and home. I don't know whether you want one or both, and we're going to find out in a minute. So I am proposing with a condition.
Have I got a seconder on that, please?
Proposing 4.
Yeah, you're for approval. Yeah. Seconder on that? Councillor Panel.
I think we just need a little moment to think about whether or not that condition is a reasonable one and can be applied.
Yeah.
Just bear with us for a second. Thank you.
Can we have a? Can we have a 10-minute break? Yes.
I'd just be interested to know if the proposer and seconder, the planning statement, which you will have read on a nightly basis in the lead up to this meeting, does unilaterally propose that visitors be by appointment only. That doesn't satisfy you.
Can I just ask Councillor Abbott, what would be the reason for your condition? Would it be sort of on highways grounds that you don't want traffic? Would it be on health grounds? Because that will help us work out if it's a reasonable condition.
Yes. My concern comes back to the points I raised earlier. I don't want a pet brought in any container carrying device which then would need to be incinerated, and so if except by a person on whose livelihood depended on good best legal practice, that they would go and use an organic collecting. So that's my own motivation.
Councillor Allen, can we wait until after the officers have met to clarify about the conditions?
It's a point relating to that, actually.
Okay then.
Also, it was mentioned about the roadkill. I mean, I don't quite know how that works. Does the person running the crematorium have to go and scour the lanes looking for roadkill, or how does that work? If it's from a vet, does she go to the vet to pick these animals up? I mean, it's quite a complicated situation. I mean, you could say absolutely no roadkill animals, I suppose, but that needs to be considered.
Thank you very much.
May I, while they're still?
Yes. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a bit concerned that we're going over the line into what would be operational concerns and rather than planning concerns.
This is in relation to Councillor Abbott's condition.
And I might be able to help because in many cases, roadkill has to be collected and then taken to a vet before it's then processed and gone elsewhere. And I'm sure environmental advice will tell me otherwise if that's not the case. So there's that. I hope will help you a bit better, but I'm just worried that at this point, as I say, we're going into what is the business operation and not planning, which isn't necessarily what we're here to do.
Exactly, which is the chicken and eggs, horse and cart problem about all of this.
Much right. We're now going to take a 5.5 minute break, a comfort break, and please be back on time because we've got to get on because we've got a couple more to deal with. So thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Right. We'll resume this now, and I think the officer's got an answer for Victor. Councillor Abbott, this is who we're waiting for. So I'll pass over to you, Charlotte.
Yes, we don't feel that the condition that you proposed about not allowing members of the public to come would be reasonable and meet the test of conditions. However, Janet has advised us that under health and safety, because it is just one room with the incinerator and everything in it, members of the public wouldn't be allowed in anyway under health and safety requirements. Environmental health and the council in general are the health and safety enforcers. So it's something else that will be covered by separate legislation.
And the licence would probably require that to be the case. So and again, as I said previously, you're not going to be able to operate it without a licence.
You okay with that, Councillor? No.
Does that mean that people could still bring their animals in a plastic sack and hand it over at the door?
I think through the licence, the applicant would be advised that members of the public are not allowed to do that. Is that correct? Yeah.
Basically, the control is over to the applicant.
Okay. This is teasing out the subtleties, isn't it? And so, should someone turn up at the door and we all have too many plastic carrier bags, and it would be a natural thing to do, to bring it in a national. It would then be incumbent upon the owner-operator to behave properly as regards that, because they're not going to take their used plastic bag away with them. That would be illogical. I need to keep this shopping bag, which I've just had my poor cat in. So they will hand it to the operator, and the operator will then not burn the plastic bag in the incinerator, because they'll know that that's not allowed. So you need me to say that there's no condition. There's not that condition. There are other conditions. You've got conditional approval, but not this additional one. And I still can't see on planning reasons why it cannot go ahead. So I continue to recommend the thing for a conditional approval. All right.
Okay. Everybody had their say. Brilliant.
You're still
Yeah,
happy to second.
You agree with that?
Panel, yeah.
You're happy with that, yeah. Right, we'll move on to the vote then. We've got a proposal for approval. All those in favour, please. Yeah. Those against? Abstentions? Yet again. Thank you very much. So that application is approved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the next application, which is 020725 HHO 76 Higher Western Fields Totnes, and our case officer is Miss Hall. So I'll pass over to her for a report, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor, and good afternoon, members. Okay, so yeah, this is application 0207 25 HHO. It's a householder application for a roof extension, side extension, and a extension to the bay window. It is a non-contentious application, but the reason it is here is because the applicant is a member of staff. So under the scheme of delegation, the application is put before you today. When I was writing the report and it was published, there was still a couple of days left to run on the statutory consultation. That is now ended. We haven't received any additional comments. The only additional comment I've received is a comment from the Environmental Health Officer, because there was a question at Chair's briefing about the relationship and the impact from the air source heat pump on neighbours. I wasn't expecting any issues, and no issues have been raised by our Environmental Health Officer. Okay, so application site edged in red here. It's in Bridgetown in Totnes, within a residential area. And this is just the aerial view here, and the red dot shows the application sites. So surrounded by residential properties, and we've got a residential care home, I believe it is, next to the property, another residential unit surrounding it. So existing property here is a gable-ended frontage, linked attached to the number 77. So in terms of the changes that the application is seeking, we've got a replacement single-storey extension to the side. There's the bay window, which is to be extended up, and also there's an increase in the height of the bridge. There's also some associated changes as well, such as windows and air source heat pump. So this is the proposed elevations. So the gable would be raised, I think it's just under a metre, and then the eaves would also be raised up as well. This is the bay window here, so currently it's just single storey, and then it would raise up to the first floor as well. It's not projected any further forward. And there was a question on site on Monday about the window. So currently there's a porthole window in at the moment, and that when I compare the existing and proposed plans, that is just being increased slightly. It's just over a stairwell. We've got a single-storey extension to the side, so currently there is a partial open extension that would just be replaced with a solid extension that extends the full width of the property. And on the roof of the proposed single-storey extension, we've got the air source heat pump, and there's a couple of projections which are roof lights. And this is just a comparison drawing, just to say the additional increase in height. The key thing to point out is that it would still be below the height of number 77. And I've just got some images to show you through the street scene and the within the property itself. So this is the property here. It's obviously got number 77, and this is our care home. You can see, and as you recall on site, it's on a hill, so the properties all step in response to the topography. And this is just taken from across the road. You can see that step, and there would still be a slight step that would be retained. So what we got? Yeah, and this is also just taken from slightly further up the road, looking down, and you can see the existing property here. And currently the step is quite apparent, whereas it wasn't in the other shots. There would, like I say, there would still be that step. So in terms of the street scene and how it sits in, no concerns are raised. These are just a couple of images taken from the rear elevation where that single story extension would be replaced. And you can see in terms of the neighbours, the care home is at a slightly lower level. And this is also just shows the rear elevation of the property. I think there's some change to the first floor windows, and this window here within the apex would be replaced with a double opening window. And the applicant has provided a couple of photographs just to show what the current view is from within the roof level at the moment. So already you can look over properties, and that wouldn't change with the proposed changes. So in terms of the main issues that I've set out within the report, it's the design, the impact on the street scene, and also the neighbour relationship. And as I've set out within the report, I don't have any concerns in terms of any of the issues. We haven't received any comments from any neighbours or anyone, and the Town Council are supportive of the application. So my recommendation is for the application to be approved, subject to these conditions.
Thank you very much, Ms Hall.
No problem.
Questions for the officer? We have none. So I presume now we can move into a debate, if we wish to debate this one. Anyone would like to start that? Councillor Wright.
It seems to me that this is a pretty straightforward application that's come before us only because of the technical reason that the applicant is an employee. Having visited the site, having looked at the plans, I am happy at this early stage to recommend that it be approved in accordance with officer recommendations.
I'd second that.
There's a question.
No, I think she wanted no questions. No. Can we move straight into the vote?
As far as I'm concerned.
All in favour? All in favour? Thank you very much. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Right, we now move on to application number 3753, 24 HHO, 10 Town Park, West Alvington. And this one's come back to us again for some clarifications. And I'll pass over to the case officer. I want to say Jason, but it's not. It's Mr. Noon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The application was before members at the previous committee when there was a request made to, could we seek amendments to the glazing to the dormer to the rear elevation, which the applicant has provided. In all other respects, the application remains the same. So I'll just quickly canter through the presentation. Here is the property, front towards Town Park, rear towards the main road to the south. Yellow dot there on the property just to see the wider area. To the south is the views into and from the national landscape. And just in slightly closer detail there is our property with the pin dropped on it. Proposal comprises a number of elements. Firstly, at the front, light grey area with a little blue rectangle on top of it. That is a flat roofed front extension. The small square on the front roof slope is a dormer. Small dormer to facilitate some headspace over the stairs. The roof is raised to create additional accommodation. There is already some space in there, but it doesn't meet modern standards. They want some better space for their growing family, I believe it is. And then there is this large dormer on the rear roof slope, a big long grey rectangle. So those are the elements that comprise the application. Just to show you the scope of ridge raising that would be necessary to get this extra headspace in, I think I've more or less got those scaled next to each other correctly. So existing on the left, proposed on the right. The ridge goes up by about 500 mil, I think, to facilitate the rooms in the loft space. Front dormer for over the stairs. You can see the new window on the front of the flat roof extension. You can just see there's a little sort of lantern type light poking up there. That was the blue rectangle on the previous drawings. And then to the rear, there is a slightly enlarged flue going in, and then the dormer. What we saw previously were sort of, for the want of a better phrase, French doors opening out with Juliet balcony, 2 of them either side, with elements of other vertical glazing next to them. There was also a large window in the middle. All of this is now reduced to what you see in the bottom right-hand drawing. Just for your information, that's what we looked at last time. And then just sort of just show the side elevation there. So the box dormer on the rear, sort of obviously the more substantial one, and then the box dormer, or the small dormer on the front. It does make it sort of overstated a little bit in this elevation. Obviously the one on the front is much smaller. The one on the back is substantial. And then there's just to give you, so as you can see the internal space that we provided, the blue line, the turquoise colour is the new extension to the front to provide a kitchen diner area. And then on the roof, to work the stairs, and I think that's a little ensuite, a little bathroom in there. The front dormer, if you can see the front dormer to the up on the drawing, and then the box dormer across the rear roof slope. That is a photograph of the front of the property. It does have a pitched roof garage to the front. And in street view, we see there are a number of pitched roof front extensions. The issue we have with the front extension is we consider it substantial and flat roofed. That's the alien bit there, which is sort of at odds with the pitched roof form more generally. To the rear, the property is the one with the 2 roof lights behind the lamp post. No objection in principle to this going up. All the others have had similar alterations. Generally speaking, however, with the exception of on the extreme right, these alterations have been achieved without resorting to flat roof box dormers. We say that flat roof box dormer is of an inappropriate design for this. There are other options. Pitch, you can see everyone else has done something slightly differently, but steered away from the dormer. We did sort of mention that the national landscape is to the south. This is a view from there. The property sort of is up here. So it's quite a substantial distance away from here. In views, I think that box dormer, now that the glazing has been taken out of it, I think the light pollution elements are probably overcome, given the sort of array of development that you already have. And then that's from the same place, just zoomed in. You can see it there with the 2 little roof lights on it. And then from another sort of perspective, another point. So I think here what we're saying is, in terms of the impact on the national landscape, we're suggesting that the reduced glazing to the rear dormer has now acceptably mitigated the concern we had in the 4th reason for refusal in the original recommendation. We suggest that can be dropped. We maintain our concerns about the front dormer, the rear dormer in terms of its size and design, and the substantial flat roof front extension. So we've repeated the previous 3 reasons for refusal, the first 3. We've dropped the 4th one in light of the amended plans. Recommendation is therefore one of refusal for the 3 reasons in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. Any questions for the officer, please? No questions. We have no speakers on this one because it's obviously something that's come back to us, and the speakers done their bit on the 20th of February. So I suppose I can go straight into. Is that a question? No. Yes, sir. Well, we move into debate then. Right.
Yes, I moved refusal last time and that wasn't carried. I was very concerned about the dark skies, and I'm very pleased that issue has been addressed and the amount of light spill has been significantly reduced. I'll abstain on this, but I imagine that members will stick to their feelings at the last meeting, but I can just say I am very pleased that the dark skies has been dealt with.
Anyone else like to? Yes, Councillor Rake.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit I was fairly blithe about its additional impact on the dark skies last time round, because it is part of a built area. There are streetlights, etc. And I just in its actual context, as we see there, I really don't. I have to admit, I just don't get the objection to the box dormer or to the front roof flat extension. I think, and I think, you know, they're all of relatively recent date. It's already been made a hodgepodge by the ones that we see on the right of that picture there, the large glass conservatory on the left. I don't think there's any sort of particular architectural theme or consistency that requires preserving, and I don't think that a box dormer is an inherently bad idea. So although I was blithe about it, I do welcome the efforts made by the applicant to address the light spill issue. But I would move, in fact, at this stage, just to recognise that we have spent a lot of time on things this morning, but I would move that we approve this application contrary to officer recommendations on the basis that the architectural impact is, that as a committee we find the architectural impact not unacceptable.
We will need some reasons on that, I think, because the fact is it's against officer recommendation.
Sorry, I thought I was giving reasons.
I think yeah. Okay, well, they acceptable. The reasons acceptable, are they? Okay. A seconder for that, please. Councillor Oram.
Chairman, presumably that is a second a proposal to a delegated approval to the head of development management.
Correct, with any additional conditions, etc., to be agreed with myself, Councillor Oram, and the chair.
Can we have a bit more of a debate before a vote? Because that's
yes, you will. Yeah, no problem with that.
So Councillor Allen was next.
Right, Councillor Allen.
Why she was worried.
You mentioned 3 reasons for refusal, but I could only see 2 up on the screen. What was so the front and north and back elevations, basically.
They were
3.
Yes, there are 3 reasons. What we've done is to split them up into the reason why we say the front extension is not acceptable, the reason why we say the front dormer is not acceptable, and the reason why we say the back dormer is not acceptable. On the basis that members may disagree with us, they may knock one of those reasons out, they may knock all 3 of them out. But it gave you the option to say, we're happy with that and that, but we don't like that, so refuse it for just for that one reason. So I think what we're saying here is that you don't agree with us on any of those reasons, which is fair enough. I mean, in terms of, if you were minded to approve it, I'm just having a quick look as far as the conditions go. As far as I recall, that we would say that you probably just need the standard time limit and compliance with the plans. I don't think there were any requested. I'm just checking the consultation responses. I think there is an ecological report in there. If there is, we need to just condition compliance with the recommendations of the ecology report. Usual thing, taking the roof off, moving it up again. But I think that would be it.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. Thank you, Mr. Noon. Is there any further questions before we go into the vote? Just Councillor Oram? You said just me. Yeah, just me. Councillor Oram.
Actually, I hadn't quite finished my point. Sorry, because it was a debate rather than
it's a debate. Yes.
Setting. So, as my contribution to the debate is, I think when you look at the long distance view of the buildings, and I think because so many of them have come forward with peaked roofs, that this building stands out anyway because it's the only one that hasn't come forward. So it's already an incongruous flat shape. So this is just continuing the incongruous flat shape. But what I understand is that those buildings were that shape originally. So all the other ones have changed, except for that one. Am I right with that? So all the other ones have had front extensions which have peaked roofs. So they've already changed the look. So originally they were all a flat shape. So basically they're just continuing the original look, and everybody else has changed. Would that be?
I think that is fair. I think they were pretty uniform bungalows originally, and I think they've all architectural interest has been added, shall we say?
My problem with it is the fact is it doesn't sit nicely with a big flat roof when all the rest have got small gable extensions. That would be the only problem. Councillor Oram, I think.
Yep.
Councillor Oram.
Thank you, Chairman. When this last came to committee, I suggested that this planning application is so over, it's covert. And I kind of stick by that, because there are all these different developments either side of it. It wouldn't look out of place with the design that's with us today. And as for the front of the property, I can't imagine, unless you walked right up to the gate and looked into the front part of the property, you wouldn't actually see many of those changes anyway. And I also come back to one of my previous points at the last committee, is that we had no objections to this plan from any neighbours, from parish, or anyone else for that matter. So it seems to me that the community is quite happy with what's going on here in the kind of the mixed match of properties that are happening, which is why I've seconded Councillor Rake's proposal, and got nothing else to say on the subject, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott, did you want to come in on to say something?
I've changed my mind and no thank you.
That's a privilege you got, Councillor Abbott. Is there any further questions? No? I think we can then go to the vote. And the proposal is against officer recommendation on approval. So can I have a show of hands? Against? Abstentions? One. Thank you very much. With 4 in favour, 1 against and 1 abstention, that application is approved against officer recommendation. Thank you very much. I apologise, there's 2. Because you've done your maths, obviously. But I obviously hadn't. Right, that is the end of the applications. Now I'll ask Ms Houselander to bring us up to date with the planning appeals, please, which is not a lot, I don't think.
Four appeals that we have on the list. One has been withdrawn, the others are awaiting statements, and this is the only one which we've got a decision on. It was an application for a replacement dwelling, effectively a Class Q fallback, which, and this is the site here. So this is the site, it's known as Sungate. It's effectively between Brixton and Plymouth. And the proposal was to put something up here. Originally there was a Nissan hut there, which the applicants claimed they had a Class Q on. We because it had been put into our system, but it never actually got dealt with, and as a result, they think they have deemed permission. We don't think they did, and the inspector wasn't even interested in that aspect of the appeal, because it was not for the appeal to make that decision. So anyway, the replacement dwelling, so this. So that replaced the Nissan hut, the Nissan Class Q, yes, yeah. So that application was refused, and the inspector agreed with us about the design being very poor, and also the location being unsustainable in the middle of the countryside, away from any built form, and whilst they had not put forward any mitigation towards the Tamar EMS, the inspector considered that it wasn't necessarily another reason to dismiss the appeal. It could be dealt with by the submission of a unilateral undertaking, and similarly, we also gave a reason against the development on the basis that they hadn't submitted sufficient drainage information. But the inspector again considered this was a matter that could have been resolved had he gone the other way. But because he didn't go the other way, he dismissed the appeal. He felt no need to take that any further. And that's it.
Thank you very much. That was quick.
Yeah, really quick. I don't know if you want any questions or anything else.
Yeah, is there any questions on that, on the appeal? Yes, Councillor Rake.
Just a general question, Jack, if I may.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I may call you Jack.
You may.
Sorry, a bit presumptuous. I mean, the plague of Class Q, is the tide turning somewhat? I mean, this seems to be a particularly egregious example, but is in terms of if not planning law, then planning practice, are we seeing different opinions or different stances from inspectors and ourselves?
I'm not sure we're seeing different perspectives from inspectors, but internally we now, I think we felt there were some Class Q fallback applications, which is what this was, where the design was just ridiculous for where it was located, and so we now have an internal process whereby officers dealing with both Class Qs and Class Q fallbacks bring the applications to a senior managers meeting, and we debate them, so that we actually get Class Qs which reflect the rural situation within which they're located. And I think that's been, that's been proven quite successful. And I think inspectors probably are a little bit more concerned when you see something which should be on an urban housing estate as opposed to a rural area. And I think there is some support from that on that basis now. Thank you.
And is that approach proving robust at appeal?
I can't say definitely that it is, because I don't know. I can't, I need to do a bit of research. But I know we within the service are very concerned that we get maybe houses which have a more of a rural feel and materials and all of those sorts of things. And the appeals, I think, we're yet to be in a situation where we know the answer to that. But certainly this one, there's no way this should have been improved in terms of its design because of its rural location.
Thank you very much. That's music to my ears, because we get too many out there. But that's by the way. Councillor Next.
Yeah, just to say, obviously it's in my ward, and the feeling about this locally was very much the size of it to start with, but also the materials used. It just wasn't in keeping with the area. I think you just said, an estate. It's more an estate house. It's not what was. So we were really pleased. I know the parish was very pleased to see this appeal dismissed. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from the side stander? No. So we just got now to provide an update on underdetermined undetermined major applications. This one is for noting, but if you've got any questions from any one of them, because I think there's several, please ask now. No questions? So that is noted. So that seems to be the end of the DM for today. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we're finishing